Hey everyone, I'm going to do a book tag video today. I've actually never done one of these tags, but I've seen this one floating around BookTube and it looked like a lot of fun. It's called the Mid-Year Freakout tag. And although I'm not freaking out about my reading or anything, it's a great way to kind of summarize the first half of my reading year for all of you, talk about some of my favorite books. The tag has 13 questions, which I'll answer for all of you. And it's just a great way to kind of sum up the year. I've read 61 books as I'm filming this video in 2022, so by the end of June I'll be at 63 or 64, which is by far the most books I've ever read. And I've read in about 8 different genres, the fantasy genre being number 1, but a lot of other genres, science fiction, historical fiction, magical realism are right up there as well. So this is a good cross-section of the kind of things that I've read this year and enjoyed this year. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first prompt is, what's the best book that I've read so far this year? And that is undoubtedly Shogun by James Clavell. This is an epic work. It's a big boy. This is an epic work of historical fiction set in Japan in the year 1600, and it follows a sailor named Blackthorn who is marooned on Japan. And it is his trials and tribulations to simply survive and be a part of the Japanese society. And I really love the themes of cross-cultural learning in this as Blackthorn starts to learn about the Japanese and the Japanese start to learn about his European ways. And it is just a sprawling tale that I was just totally immersed and just totally fell in love with it. So best book so far this year is definitely James Clavell's Shogun. Next question, best sequel you've read so far this year, and that is the Tawny Man trilogy by Robin Hobb. The 3 books are Fool's Errand, The Golden Fool, and Fool's Fate. So the Tawny Man trilogy, this is the 3rd book series in Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings. And there are 5 series in that interconnected series that take place in different parts of the world. But this series follows the same character Fitz from the Farseer trilogy. So in many ways is a direct sequel to the first series of the Realm of the Elderlings. And in many ways, although it picks up many years later, it really follows a lot of the themes and a lot of the trauma that Fitz went through in that first trilogy and addresses a lot of that. It is a masterful work. For weeks, I've been promising a video about this book series, and I promise that I will get that done sometime in July. But Tawny Man trilogy is definitely my best sequel I've read this year. Number 3, new release you haven't read yet, but you want to. I'm going to back up into November of last year, and I'm going to choose The Last Shadow by Orson Scott Card. If you didn't know on my channel, I'm rereading all of the books in the Ender Quintet and Ender Shadow series this year because that newest book, The Last Shadow, is the culmination of both of those book series. So I've been reading those and giving a review each month of the various installments in that series, and I'm looking forward to reading The Last Shadow in December of this year. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I actually have, I think, 4 books already pre-ordered that'll be arriving at various points in the last half of the year, but my number 1 is undoubtedly Fairy Tale by Stephen King. My favorite author, writing in my favorite genre. I can't wait to read that book. Number 5, my biggest disappointment of the year. More Stephen King. My biggest disappointment this year was the Gwendy's Button Box trilogy. And the 3rd one, Gwendy's Final Task, this one came out this year, and I hadn't read the first 2. And this book's pretty good, but the first 2 books were they just weren't very good. It started with a good premise, but it didn't really go anywhere. And as a whole, I was just kind of very, very lukewarm. In fact, when I reviewed these at the end of whatever month I finished these, I said that unless you're a completionist for Stephen King, I really think you can skip these. Gwendy's Final Task is the only one worth your time. So these were a disappointment for me because anytime Stephen King comes out with something, as I said with Fairy Tale, I'm really excited to read it. Unfortunately, these ones fell a little short for me. All right, next question. Biggest surprise. I don't know why this one's a surprise to me, but I absolutely loved Sharp Ends by Joe Abercrombie. The surprise is not that I love the Joe Abercrombie, because I adore Joe Abercrombie's writing, but this is a short story collection. And even though I have read probably a lot more short stories this year than any year in my reading life, I don't like short stories quite as much as the epic works. You know, you asked me to choose between Sharp Ends and Shogun. I'm going to take Shogun every single time. So I was really pleased that I loved every one of these little stories here. Some of them followed some characters from the First Law trilogy. Some of them were from the standalones in that universe. And then there were 3 stories of brand new characters that I just loved right away because Abercrombie is one of the best at creating character. So this was definitely my most pleasant surprise of the year. All right, number 7, favorite new author. So I couldn't decide between 2, so I'm going to give you 2. One is James Clavell with Shogun. I know there are at least 5 more epics of historical fiction set in Asia that he's written that I definitely want to explore. And the other author is R.F. Kuang. I read The Poppy War, and although I wouldn't say I loved that series, I really, really liked it. And some aspects of the series I loved, and I just want to see where she goes as an author. I have Babel on pre-order already, so that's going to arrive, I think, in August. So she's an author that I'm kind of just keeping my eye out because I really enjoyed a lot of the aspects of the Poppy War trilogy. So she is one that I want to read more of. Ooh, we're getting personal with this one. Newest fictional crush. I had to think about this one because this isn't something I normally think about when I'm reading, but I would have to say the character Mariko from Shogun would be my fictional crush for 2022. I just really loved, one of the great things in that book I loved were her conversations with Blackthorn where they were learning from each other. Because the cross-cultural learning is one of the biggest themes in that book that I loved. And her learning about his ways and her teaching him the ways of the Japanese. I just love seeing these characters connect through their learning about one another and one another's cultures. So I guess my fictional crush this year is Mariko from Shogun. Newest favorite character. This was a really tough one. Really tough one. And I actually went a direction that I wouldn't have pegged this character as the one because this isn't an author that I think about characters, but I'm going to pick Ayomame from 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. And maybe the reason that I really like this character is she's a character of action, and Murakami doesn't always write characters that have agency. A lot of time his protagonists just kind of sit and let the action happen around them. But when you meet Ayomame in the first chapter, you find out right away when you see what she does, she's a character of action. And I found her entirely compelling the entire story of 1Q84. Okay, book that made me cry. I think I have that here. That would be Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb, which is in this stack somewhere. Fool's Fate is the 3rd book of Tawny Man trilogy. And in many ways, the emotions that you face with the main character of Fitz in the Farseer trilogy that in many ways go unresolved, get resolved in this trilogy. And it's heartbreaking and cathartic, and I would estimate that the last 300 pages of that book, I had to fight back tears a lot because Hobb is just so good. You just really, Fitz at this point, and you see everything that he's gone through and the people around him, what they've gone through, and you see him confronting some of the things that have happened in his life. And it is so emotionally moving and so emotionally satisfying. So Fool's Fate is definitely one that made me cry this year. Book that made me happy. This is actually a book series that made me happy. And that is The Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. So what made me most happy about this is this 5-book series was the first fantasy series I ever read. I read it in 6th grade. Fresh new at middle school, going to the library, and I saw this picture of the Book of Three, and I saw the cover, and it spurred my imagination, and I just wanted to read Lloyd Alexander. And immediately, this genre just hooked me, and it became my favorite genre through middle school and high school. And then I took a break for a while, and now I'm back to reading a lot of fantasy. So it made me very happy to just be back with these characters and kind of reminisce and feel nostalgic for it. It is a middle grade series, but I will say the fourth book introduces some very adult themes, and I love the very brave ending. I think it's a much braver ending than a lot of middle grade and YA type of fantasy normally does, because it's kind of bold. So I really enjoyed. If you've never read Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain and you don't mind reading middle grade fiction, I really recommend it. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, 2 more questions. Most beautiful book you've bought or acquired this year? I'm going to back up 1 week into 2021 since this was a Christmas gift, and this is that edition of James Clavell's Shogun. It's just gorgeous, leather bound, and I wish that the other books in this Asian saga were also leather bound. I'll have to get those, unfortunately, at a different format, but this is just a really, really gorgeous book, and even just enhance the reading experience for that one. All right, last question. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? So one thing I really want to read by the end of the year is a reread, because in November, The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson is coming out. That's book 4 of Mistborn Era 2, and I want to reread the first 3 books. So I'm likely going to read them 1 per month starting in August. So if any of you want to join me, I'll start with The Alloy of Law in August. I'll read 1 each month leading up to The Lost Metal being released in November. Well, there is my mid-year Freakout tag. I don't think I freaked out. But let me know if you enjoyed this kind of video, if I should do more of these tag videos. It was fun to think about and just see the questions, and I've enjoyed watching a lot of other booktubers do this as well, and kind of seeing all the great things that they've read this year. If you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. If you hit the little bell icon, you'll get a notification next time I upload a video. If you want to interact more, I'd love to interact with you on Twitter and Goodreads. There are some great communities of people there that I've really enjoyed getting to know. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.